Hi, my name is Kate Cox, and for my project, I decided to do incarceration rate, correlation, and regression modeling. So for the project plan, I wanted to first do data overview and interpretation of the data, determine a predictive model to predict incarceration rate, evaluate if the model is a good predictor for states with highest and lowest incarceration rates, and evaluate the relationship between other factors other than the incarceration rate, and finally the conclusion. The objectives I set were to determine the correlation between incarceration rate in each state and other variables associated with that state, create a predictive model to determine which variables are the greatest predictors, and analyze the correlation between variables other than incarceration rate. For the data, my data consists of 6 variables with 50 observations each by a United States state in 2018. It contains 4 numeric variables, including incarceration rate and homicide rate, measured in by 100,000 people, the percentages of people in poverty and average annual temperatures in degrees Fahrenheit, and 2 categorical variables, including race by percentage of the population, with the percentage of the population that is white as a baseline, and the percentage of the population that is Black and other minorities being predictors. Also, the political affiliation of the governor. So for my data, the incarceration rate, this is for the entirety of the United States. The mean was 677.86 per 100,000 people, with a median of 690.5 per 100,000 people. The homicide rate was 5.614 per 100,000 people, with a median of 5.6. The poverty rate was had a mean of 11.224%, with a median of 10.55%. The annual average temperatures had a mean of 51.944 degrees Fahrenheit, with a median of 51.2 degrees Fahrenheit. And the racial composition of the United States is 60.6% black, or white rather, 12.3% black, and 27.1% other minority. And there are 24 states with a Democratic governor and 26 states with a Republican governor. I wanted to include a histogram of the frequency of incarceration rates, just to get a feel for the that distribution and how often each one occurs. I also wanted to include scatter plots to show the relationship between each variable and incarceration rate. As you can see, there is a positive relationship between homicide rate and incarceration rate, the Black population and incarceration rate, temperatures and incarceration rate, and poverty and incarceration rate. But there tends to be a slight negative relationship between the other minorities and incarceration rate, and white population and incarceration rate. So here I have included the correlation plot and coefficients, which back up the relationships that we saw from the scatter plots. We can also see that homicide rate and poverty rates tend to have a stronger correlation than the other variables. We also wanted to test the normalcy assumption of the residuals by doing the normal probability plot of residuals, and it appears that all of these follow a normal distribution. In order to find the model, I did multiple linear regression with backwards deletion and forward selection. For both of these two models, I ended up getting all of the variables present in both of them. Otherwise, the AIC gets worse if any of them are missing. And the model that I got is highlighted in red, with an AIC of 486.08 and an R-squared of 0.6322. But note that the white population is not included, as it is a baseline for the other racial groups. So this is not the greatest model, but it does generally predict the incarceration rate. So here, just showing what I said before, that it's not the best fit model, but it does have the same general trend and will predict the incarceration rate. So I wanted to see if this model was a good fit for the states with the highest and lowest incarceration rates. So here's some data for the 10 states with the highest incarceration rate. And I calculated the percent difference between the actual value and the predicted value of the incarceration rate. And here we can see that the percent difference is either a larger positive value or a smaller negative value, and you get a mean percent difference of 6.9% about. And as for the 10 states with the lowest incarceration rate, the percent difference is negative for all of these, and it has a mean percent difference of negative 26.7 about, which means that the predicted value is higher than the actual value based on the model. So just some observations I made about the data. The states with higher incarceration rate tend to have Republican governors, tend to be states with higher annual temperatures, tend to have larger Black populations, and tend to have higher percentages of poverty, while the states with lower incarceration rate tend to have Democratic governors, tend to be states with lower annual temperatures, tend to have smaller Black populations, and tend to have lower percentages of poverty. I wanted to look at this categorized by the political affiliation of the governors. So the histograms that are included are the frequencies of the incarceration rate. The one on the left is for states with Democratic governors, and the one on the right is for states with Republican governors. As we can see, the incarceration rate is lower in states with Democratic governors with a mean of 620.333 versus the mean of the Republican governed states is 730.9615. And the percent error of the model is a larger negative for the Democratic governed states than Republican governed states. I also did a t-test to test if there was a significant difference in the incarceration rates of Democratic governed states and Republican governed states, and it turned out that there is. And it is a significant difference. So here I've included the correlation plots by political affiliation of governor, just because I thought it was interesting to see how they differed. So some other observations I made was that higher average temperatures and higher incarceration rates tend to have a correlation. And I did a Pearson correlation test for this, and it turned out to have a significant correlation. I also noticed that there seemed to be a correlation between Black populations and higher incarceration rates, there is also a significant correlation between these two variables. And there's also a significant correlation between higher poverty and higher incarceration rates. So here I've included that correlation plot again, the first one we saw, but this time just with the correlation coefficients in there instead of just squares. So we can see that there is a moderately strong correlation between poverty and homicide rate, Black population and homicide rate and average temperatures, annual temperature, and white and Black populations. So to check these observations that I made, I also did Pearson correlation tests for these. And we can see that and I also included scatter plots just for a visual. So there is a significant correlation between poverty and homicide rate. Also, it is significant between the Black population homicide rate and the average temperatures and homicide rate, with all of these being a positive correlation. And I also checked the correlation between average annual temperature and white and Black populations. And there's a significant negative correlation between temperatures and white population and a positive correlation between temperatures and Black population. So some conclusions that I drew from this was that there are correlation between the following variables. Higher average temperatures and incarceration rate, higher Black population and higher incarceration rate, higher poverty and higher incarceration rate, higher poverty and higher homicide rate, larger Black populations and higher homicide rates, higher annual temperatures and homicide rate, and lower annual temperatures and higher white populations, and higher annual temperatures and higher Black populations.